In this story for JBC English Learning Academy, I want you to imagine a slow, quiet morning, the kind of morning when the sun rises gently and the world feels soft and warm. I want you to sit with me, breathe slowly, and listen to a simple story told in simple English. Together, we will practice English in a natural way, the way you would listen to a friend speaking in a calm voice. Today, I want to share a story about something very small but very powerful, something that everyone in the world experiences, no matter where they are from. And that small thing is food. Not just any food, but my favorite food. It may sound simple, but sometimes the simplest stories teach us the clearest English. So, let me begin from the very beginning, when I was younger, and when food was not only something I ate, but something that shaped my memories, my feelings, and the way I understood home. I remember the first time I realized that food had a kind of magic. It was a quiet afternoon. The air was warm, and there was the smell of something cooking in the kitchen. It was not a strong smell, not a loud smell, but it was a kind of smell that made my heart feel light, like I was safe, like I was home. I didn't understand it at the time. I was just a child with simple thoughts. But as I walked closer to the kitchen, I saw a pot on the small stove, slowly boiling with soft little bubbles, releasing an aroma that felt like a hug. That aroma was from my favorite food, warm chicken soup. Simple, soft, gentle chicken soup. Maybe it sounds too simple. Maybe you were expecting something big or spicy or famous. But for me, this soup was not just a dish. It was a moment, a memory, a warm story that stayed with me throughout my entire life. You see, the soup was not special because of its ingredients. It was special because of what it made me feel. Every spoon of it tasted like comfort. Every smell of it felt like a promise that everything would be okay. Sometimes, when life felt confusing, or when school felt difficult, or when I felt tired, that soup always brought me back to myself. It was like a friend, a quiet friend who didn't speak, but who listened to my feelings. And that is why, even today, when someone asks me about my favorite food, I smile a little, because I know most people expect a big answer, something like pizza or pasta or something with a long name. But my answer stays the same: warm chicken soup. Soft chicken soup with a light smell and a gentle taste. Not too salty, not too spicy, not too strong. Just warm and simple. Now, at this moment, as I speak to you, I want you to imagine the smell of something warm. Imagine a bowl in your hands. Imagine steam rising from it. Imagine how it feels when something warm touches your lips after a long day. That feeling is the feeling I want to share with you in this English listening practice. Because learning English is not only about words. It is about feelings, emotions, pictures, sounds, small stories, and small moments. When you listen to my voice slowly and carefully, you are not only learning new words, you are learning how to think in English, how to feel in English, how to connect your own memories with the language you hear. So let me take you back to that day again, the day I truly began to understand my favorite food. I walked into the kitchen. The room was filled with sunlight that fell through a small window. The sunlight touched the table, the bowls, the spoon, the pot, and the small pieces of vegetables that were waiting to join the soup. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft sound of the boiling water. It sounded like a whisper, a gentle whisper that said, "Welcome, you're home." I stood there for a moment, just breathing the warm smell. Even though I didn't know many things about life at that age, I knew one thing. This food made me happy. And sometimes, happiness is the simplest way to understand the world. But this story is not only about food. This story is also about learning something new, just like you are learning English right now. There was a moment in my life when I tried to cook my favorite food by myself for the first time. I was older then, no longer a small child, but still a person who was trying to understand the world. I remember standing in the kitchen again, but this time the kitchen felt bigger. The pot looked heavier, the ingredients looked more serious, and I felt nervous. I wanted the soup to taste like the soup I remembered, the soup from my childhood. But I didn't know if I could make it the same way. And that is when the story changed into a little challenge. Making soup seems simple, but when you try to capture a memory, a flavor, a warm feeling, it becomes something different. I put the chicken in the pot. I added water. I cut the vegetables. I put a little salt. I listened to the boiling water, just like before. But something inside me felt unsure. What if it didn't taste right? What if I couldn't make the soup that comforted me before? What if I failed at making something so simple? The kitchen felt quiet again, but not warm quiet, nervous quiet. I stood there, thinking about the past, the present, and everything in between. But learning English, cooking soup, and living life all share something in common. You never know if you can do something until you try. And trying is the first step to everything. Trying is the step that opens the door. Trying is the moment when you say yes, even when you're afraid. So I tried. I waited. I tasted the soup. And at first, it didn't taste right. It tasted too plain, too soft, too empty. I felt a little disappointed. But then I remembered something small, something that changed everything. I remembered that when I was younger, someone always added a little bit of love to the soup. Not an ingredient you can buy, not something you can measure. Just a calm feeling, a quiet intention, a slow moment of care. So I slowed down. I breathed. I tasted again. I added a tiny bit more salt. I added a few more vegetables. I let the soup cook a little longer. And slowly, something changed. The smell changed. The taste changed. And when I tasted it again, I felt it, the warm feeling, the memory, the comfort. The soup tasted just like I remembered. At that moment, I realized something important. My favorite food was not my favorite because of the ingredients. It was my favorite because it reminded me of home, of safety, of childhood, of quiet afternoons, of warm sunlight, and of simple joy. And just like that, I realized something else sometimes. The simplest things in life are the ones that teach us the most. Just like learning simple English. Just like listening to a simple story. Just like understanding simple feelings. And that is why today, in this A1 English listening practice, I want you to think about your own favorite food. Think about the smell. Think about the taste. Think about the memory behind it. Think about how it makes you feel. Your favorite food is not just a dish, it is a story. And when you learn to describe that story in English, you are not only learning the language, you are learning how to express yourself, how to communicate feelings, how to connect with others through simple words. So let me ask you softly, as a friend and as your English coach, what is your favorite food? How does it make you feel? Why do you love it? These questions are not only for speaking practice. They are questions that help you understand your own story. And when you know your own story, learning English becomes easier, smoother, more natural. You begin to speak with emotion, not just grammar. You begin to listen with curiosity, not just with your ears. You begin to understand English the way you understand your own life, slowly, calmly, and with an open heart. And that brings me to the little takeaway of this first section. Sometimes the most powerful stories come from the simplest things. Sometimes the strongest memories come from the softest moments. And sometimes the best English practice comes from the stories we carry inside ourselves every day. That is why my favorite food is not something expensive or complicated. It is something warm, soft, gentle, and full of memories. And as we continue this long listening practice together, I will share more stories like this. Calm stories, emotional stories, simple stories, stories that help you learn English in the most natural way. When I think about my favorite food now, the warm chicken soup that has followed me through so many years, I understand something deeper about it, something I did not see when I was young. Back then, the soup was only a taste, a smell, a warm feeling in my stomach. But as I grew older, I learned that the soup carried a memory, a piece of time that stayed inside me, like a soft echo that never disappeared. And I want to take you into that memory, step by step, slowly and gently, because this is not only a story about food. This is a story about how small things shape who we are, how simple moments become important, and how the things we love teach us about life, about English, and about ourselves. So come with me again as I return to another day in my past, another day when this soup, this simple bowl of comfort, taught me a new lesson. It was a cool evening, not too cold, not too warm, but the kind of evening when the sky turns a soft orange before it becomes night. I remember sitting on a small chair beside a wooden table. I was tired from the day, tired from school, tired from homework, tired from everything that made my young mind feel heavy. And then, like a kind miracle, I heard the soft sound of the pot lid, the sound of someone lifting it, the soft clink of metal, the gentle movement of steam rising into the air. The smell of the soup entered the room slowly, and just like that, my tiredness began to disappear. The smell of the soup entered the room slowly, and just like that, my tiredness began to disappear. I didn't speak much back then. I didn't always know how to explain my feelings. But the soup understood me without words. That is something I always found magical, how food can listen, how food can speak in silence, how food can tell us, you're okay, without saying anything at all. As I sat there, watching the steam rise in little swirls, I felt something inside me relax. I felt the world become simple again. And that is when I realized that favorite foods are not chosen by taste alone. They are chosen by the heart. They are shaped by moments. They are built from the people who made them, the places where we ate them, the feelings we had in that moment. Even now, when I think of that evening, I remember a soft light in the room, a calm voice calling my name, and the gentle sound of a spoon mixing the soup in the pot. All of these small details made the food feel alive, like it had its own story. And I think this is why so many people, all around the world, can talk for hours about their favorite food, because they are not only talking about flavor, they are talking about a memory that belongs to them, a memory that no one else has in the same way. But the story of the soup does not end with childhood. It continued to follow me, even when I grew up, even when I left home, even when life changed and became bigger, faster, and sometimes more difficult. When I moved away from the place where I grew up, I discovered something interesting. I missed the soup more than I missed some people. I missed its warmth, its calmness, its simple honesty. When you move to a new place, everything feels different. The streets are different, the faces are different, the sounds are different, even the air feels different. And when everything around you feels unfamiliar, you begin to search for something small that feels like home. For some people, it is music. For some, it is a smell. For others, it is a photograph or a voice message or a small object they carry in their pocket. For me, it was a memory of this soup. So one day, in my small kitchen in my new home, far away from the place where I grew up, I decided to make it again. I wanted to bring back the feeling that everything was okay. I wanted to bring back the warmth of the past into my present. And with that simple decision, the soup became something new, not only a childhood memory, but a part of my adult life. So I went to the market. The market was busy, full of people rushing, full of voices talking, full of smells that mixed together in colorful ways. I walked slowly, trying to find the ingredients the way I remembered them. I found fresh vegetables, soft pieces of chicken, and a few pieces of herbs that reminded me of home. I carried them back to my room, feeling both excited and nervous. Making something from your childhood is never simple. You don't only want the right taste. You want the right memory. You want the right feeling. You want the past to visit you in the present. And that is not always easy. But I tried anyway, because sometimes the things that matter most are worth trying for, even when we are afraid. In my new kitchen, I prepared everything slowly. I washed the vegetables. I cut them carefully. I placed the chicken gently into the pot. I added water, just enough, not too much, not too little. I waited. The water began to boil softly. The smell began to rise, but at first, it didn't smell quite right. It smelled close to what I remembered, but not exactly the same. And for a moment, I felt disappointed. But then I reminded myself of something important. Memories live in feelings, not in perfect flavors. So I stopped trying to chase the exact memory. I stopped trying to force the soup to taste like the past. Instead, I let it become something new, something that belonged to where I was now, something that belonged to this new chapter of my life. And when I did that, the feeling changed. The smell changed. And I realized that my favorite food had grown with me. It was no longer only the food of my childhood. It became the food of my journey. As I sat down to eat it, I held the bowl in my hands for a moment before taking the first spoonful. The warmth of the bowl felt comforting, like a small hug in my palms. I took a sip. The taste was simple, warm, soft, gentle, and suddenly, everything inside me relaxed. I felt at peace. I felt connected to my past and present at the same time. And at that moment, I learned a new lesson. Sometimes we carry pieces of home with us in our hearts, and these pieces help us feel safe no matter where we are. This is something I want you to understand as you listen to English, as you learn new words, as you try to make sense of this language. English is not only about grammar rules or vocabulary lists. English is also about the small pieces of your own life that you carry with you. When you practice speaking, you are not only practicing sounds. You are practicing connection. You are practicing expression. You are learning how to share your own memories, your own stories, your own feelings. And just like making soup for the first time in a new place, learning English sometimes feels unfamiliar, sometimes confusing, sometimes not quite right. But if you continue, if you try again, if you take your time, eventually something clicks. The smell changes. The taste changes. The feeling changes. And slowly, English begins to feel like a part of you. So as you listen to me now, I want you to think of your own favorite food again. But this time, I want you to ask yourself a deeper question. Why is it your favorite? What memory does it carry? What moment does it remind you of? Who was with you when you first tasted it? Where were you? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? These questions help you build a story that can help you practice speaking English. Because every story you tell becomes a tool for learning, a tool for connection, a tool for understanding the world in a new language. And here is the simple takeaway of this second section. Your favorite food is not only a favorite because of taste. It is a favorite because it holds a memory inside it. A warm, gentle memory that belongs only to you. And when you learn to share that memory in English, you grow. You grow in confidence. You grow in expression. You grow in your ability to speak and understand this language with emotion and clarity. There is something beautiful about a favorite food, something gentle and quiet, something that stays with you in ways you don't always notice. My warm chicken soup, the simple bowl of comfort that filled my childhood with calm and peace, did not only stay in the past. It traveled with me as I grew older, like a small light inside my heart that never went out. And in this part of the story for JBC English Learning Academy, I want to take you on a journey through moments in my life when this food appeared again, not as a dish on a table, but as a feeling, a reminder, a soft voice that said, "You are not alone." Because a favorite food does not only live in the kitchen. It lives in your memory, your emotions, your senses, your stories. And as I tell you this long narration in simple English, I want you to relax your shoulders, breathe slowly, and feel the rhythm of the language in your mind, the way you would feel the warm steam rising from a fresh bowl of soup. There was a time in my life when everything changed very quickly. I had finished school, and I was preparing for my first job. The world felt big and full of movement. People around me seemed confident, busy, focused. Everyone walked fast, talked fast, lived fast. But I did not feel fast. I felt unsure. I felt like I was standing at the beginning of a long road, holding a small map that I didn't fully understand. I remember waking up early in the morning on my first day of work. The air was still cold. The sky was still dark. My heart was beating faster than normal, and my hands felt a little shaky. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to take a deep breath, but it didn't help much. I wasn't afraid of the job. I was afraid of the unknown. And sometimes, the unknown feels bigger than anything else. As I walked out of my home and into the world, I felt like I was stepping into a story that had no beginning. Everything was new. The streets were loud. The people moved quickly. The buildings felt tall. The world felt too big for me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt homesick, not for a place, but for a feeling. I felt homesick for warmth, for softness, for something familiar. And without planning it, without thinking about it, my mind returned to my favorite food. I remembered the warm bowl. I remembered the gentle smell. I remembered the quiet afternoons when the soup made me feel safe. And that memory, that small and simple memory, gave me a bit of strength. It made me feel that even though I was in a big, new world, I still carried a piece of home inside me. When lunchtime came on my first day, I sat alone at a small table in the company cafeteria. People around me were laughing, talking, telling stories about their weekends or their families. I listened quietly. I wanted to join them, but I didn't know how. Their conversations felt too fast, too natural, too comfortable. And I didn't feel comfortable at all. So I ate in silence, thinking about the warm soup again. It may sound strange, but in that moment, the memory felt like someone holding my hand. It reminded me that even when I feel alone, I am not truly alone. Our memories travel with us. Our favorite tastes travel with us. Our stories travel with us. And they help us grow, slowly, gently, one moment at a time. That night, when I returned home from my first day of work, I felt drained. My feet hurt. My head was full. My body was tired. I sat on my bed and closed my eyes. And then, Almost like a soft whisper inside my mind, I thought, maybe I should make some soup. It had been a long time since I made it. I had been busy with new responsibilities, new routines, new challenges. But something inside me knew that this was the moment when I needed that warm feeling again. So I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and began making the soup slowly, calmly, the same way I used to, the same way I learned when I moved away from home. I cut the vegetables. I added the chicken. I let the water boil gently. And as the smell rose from the pot, I felt a wave of comfort wash over me. I sat down with the bowl in my hands. The steam touched my face softly. I took a spoonful. And, just like that, the stress of the day began to melt away. The soup reminded me that it was okay to grow slowly. It was okay to feel unsure. It was okay not to know everything. Life is not a race. Life is a journey. And sometimes, the smallest things help us the most along the way. That night taught me something important. A favorite food is not only something you like. It is something you return to when you feel lost. Something that brings you back to yourself. Something that helps you breathe again. And as I sat there in the quiet kitchen, eating slowly, listening to the gentle sound of the spoon touching the bowl, I understood that this soup would always be a part of my life, in every chapter, in every place, in every moment when I needed comfort. Years later, when I traveled to a different country for the first time, the soup followed me again, not in my bag, not in my suitcase, but in my heart. Everything was different there, the language, the culture, the weather, the food, the smiles of the people. Even the sky felt different. I was excited, but I was also afraid. And during my first week in this new country, I walked into a small restaurant. The place was quiet, with soft music playing and warm lights hanging above the tables. I sat down and looked at the menu. I didn't recognize most of the dishes. The words felt foreign, the names felt unfamiliar. But then, in the corner of the menu, I saw something simple: chicken soup. The moment I saw those words, I felt a tiny spark of warmth inside me. I ordered it. When the bowl arrived, I looked at it for a moment. It didn't look like the soup from my childhood. The color was different. The vegetables were different. Even the smell was different. But when I took a sip, something surprising happened. The taste wasn't the same, but the feeling was. It made me breathe deeply. It made me feel warm. It made me relax for a moment in a world that was still new to me. And I realized something powerful. The soup didn't need to taste like home for it to feel like home. Because home is not always a place. Sometimes home is a feeling. Sometimes home is a moment. Sometimes home is a warm memory that lives inside us wherever we go. As I continued my travels, the soup became a kind of quiet companion. Whenever I felt lonely or tired or lost, I looked for a place that served soup. It could be a small restaurant, a busy cafe, or a simple food stall on the street. The taste was always different, but the comfort was always the same. And through this comfort, I learned something important about myself. I learned that I connect to the world through small things, gentle things, familiar things. And that is not a weakness. That is a strength. It means that I can find peace anywhere. It means that I can find home anywhere. It means that I carry my favorite food with me like a quiet friend. Learning English is similar. When you first start learning a new language, everything feels big and confusing. The grammar feels strange. The words feel heavy. The sounds feel fast. But then, one day, something small becomes familiar, a simple sentence, a phrase you understand, a story you connect with. And that small familiarity becomes your warm bowl of soup. It comforts you. It gives you confidence. It tells you that you can continue. And slowly, your English grows. Not because of big, difficult lessons, but because of simple, comfortable moments like this one, where a story helps you relax into the language. And that is the takeaway of this section. Your favorite food is more than flavor. It is a companion on your journey. It travels with you. It comforts you. It reminds you of who you are. And when you learn English through stories like this, English also becomes a companion, something that travels with you through your life, helping you express, understand, and connect with the world in a deeper way. When I think about the journey of my favorite food, the simple warm chicken soup that followed me from childhood into adulthood, I realize that the story does not end with me alone. There came a moment in my life when this soup stopped being only my comfort and became something I shared with someone else, someone who needed warmth the same way I needed it so many years before. And that moment taught me something beautiful, that favorite foods can connect people, bring hearts closer, open conversations, and create memories that were never planned but always cherished. So, let me take you into another part of my life, another chapter that taught me how food can move from the inside of one heart into the life of another, slowly, gently, naturally, just like a soft story told on a calm evening. At this time in my life, I had already been working for a few years. I had grown more confident, more sure of my steps, more comfortable with the world around me. But my life was still full of quiet moments, and in many of those moments, the memory of my favorite soup still warmed me. One afternoon, during a cool autumn season, something new happened. I was sitting in the break room at work when a new colleague walked in. She looked tired, her shoulders were tight, her breath was heavy, and her eyes looked like she had carried trouble all day. She sat down across from me and tried to smile, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. For a moment, we didn't say anything. The room was quiet, and the air felt a little heavy with silence. I asked her gently if she was okay. At first, she hesitated, but then she shook her head softly. She told me that it was her first week at the job, and everything felt too fast, too big, too overwhelming. She said she missed home, missed her family, missed the food she used to eat. She said even the city felt complicated, noisy, and strange. As she spoke, I remembered my own first weeks at work, how deeply I felt the weight of everything around me, how much I wanted something warm and familiar, something simple. And as I listened to her, a quiet memory rose inside me, the warm bowl of soup that comforted me on my first day. Something inside me told me that she needed that same feeling now, a feeling of calm, a feeling of warmth, reminder that she wasn't alone. So I looked at her gently and said, "Would you like to come over for dinner? I can make something warm." She seemed surprised, but her eyes softened a little. She nodded slowly. I could see a little hope return to her face, like a small light waking up. And so, later that evening, she came to my small apartment. The air outside was cool, almost cold, and when she stepped inside, she wrapped her arms around herself as if she wanted to hold warmth close. I invited her to sit at the table while I went to the kitchen to start preparing the soup. As I took out the vegetables and the chicken, I noticed she was watching me quietly, as if the simple movements were comforting to her. I didn't speak much. I didn't want to push her with questions or force a conversation. Instead, I let the soft sounds of cooking fill the space, The water running, the knife cutting gently on the board, the pot heating slowly, the quiet beginning of a boil. The room began to smell warm, soft, and familiar. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. I could see something change in her shoulders. They relaxed, just a little. When the soup was ready, I placed 2 warm bowls on the table. The steam rose gently, filling the air between us. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just held the bowl with both hands, feeling its warmth travel through her fingers. Then she took the first spoonful. She closed her eyes again, and this time, the expression on her face softened completely. I didn't need to ask her how it tasted. The feeling was clear. It reminded her of home, of safety, of something soft that she had been missing for days. She slowly opened her eyes and smiled, a real smile, a warm smile, a smile that felt like sunlight on a quiet morning. And then she said something that stayed with me for a long time. She said, "This tastes like a hug." Those words touched me deeply. In that simple sentence, she shared something important, that food can do what words cannot. Food can comfort. Food can speak. Food can listen. Food can carry emotion from one heart to another without needing a single explanation. As she ate, she began to tell me stories about her own favorite foods from her childhood. She told me about the smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of her kitchen, the evenings she spent sitting with her family. She told me how much she missed those moments, how far away they felt, and how lonely she felt in a new place. And as she spoke, I listened. I didn't correct her English. I didn't ask her to repeat anything. I didn't point out mistakes. I let her speak freely, because in moments like these, communication is more important than perfection. And as she told me her story, I realized something beautiful. We all carry a favorite food inside us, and that food carries our memories, our homes, our feelings, our childhood, our love. And when we share that food, we share a part of ourselves. After dinner, she helped me wash the dishes. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. The warmth in the room spoke for us. When she left that night, she looked more peaceful than when she arrived. And as I watched her walk away down the quiet hallway, I felt something new. I felt grateful. Grateful that something as simple as soup could comfort another person the way it once comforted me. Grateful that I could share a piece of my story with someone who needed it. Grateful that something so small could become something so meaningful. But that evening was just the beginning. Over the next few months, we became good friends. Sometimes she came over after work, tired from the day, and I would make soup again. Sometimes she would bring a dish from her own childhood, and she taught me how to make it. We laughed, shared stories, shared mistakes, shared memories, and slowly, we built a quiet friendship that grew from a single bowl of warm soup. And from this friendship, I learned something important. Food connects people in ways that language sometimes cannot. When you share a meal, you share comfort. When you share comfort, you share trust. When you share trust, you open the door to understanding. This is how language learning works too. You don't learn English only from books or rules or exercises. You learn English from connection to stories, connection to emotions, connection to moments that feel real and human. And when you connect deeply, your English grows naturally, softly, one moment at a time. There was a moment near the end of that year when I realized how much the simple act of sharing my favorite food had changed both of our lives. We were sitting together on a cold winter evening, the wind outside brushing against the windows. I had made soup again, and we were eating slowly, talking about our day. Suddenly she said, "You know, this soup is not only your favorite food anymore. It has become one of my favorite foods too." Her words made me smile, not because the soup was special, but because the story behind it had grown bigger. It was no longer only my story. It had become part of hers too. And that is the heart of this section. Favorite foods grow when they are shared. They become bridges between people. They create spaces where we can breathe, relax, feel safe, and open our hearts. And the more we share them, the more they give back to us. So the takeaway of this part of the story is simple but powerful. A favorite food begins with one person, but it grows when it touches another life. It becomes a memory that does not live in just one heart, but in two or three or many. And just like that, learning English grows in the same way, from sharing, from listening, from speaking, from connecting. The more you share your stories, your memories, your feelings in English, the more the language becomes part of your life, part of your journey, part of your heart. And now my warm chicken soup, once a simple childhood dish, has become a symbol of connection, comfort, and kindness, something that continues to grow every time I share it. Just like this story is growing within you now as you listen to it, slowly, gently, one word at a time. There comes a moment in every story when something simple becomes something unforgettable, and for me, that moment came on the day I finally taught someone else how to make my favorite food, the warm chicken soup that had carried me through childhood, through growing up, through lonely days, through new beginnings, and through quiet friendships. Teaching the recipe was not planned. It happened in a soft and natural way, like most meaningful moments do. It was a gentle afternoon near the end of spring, the air warm but not hot, the sky bright but not too bright, and the world outside felt peaceful in a way that makes you breathe deeper without even thinking. My friend, the same friend who first tasted my soup on a difficult day months before, had become an important part of my life, someone who understood my silences and my thoughts, someone who knew when I needed comfort and when I needed space. On that afternoon, she came to my home with a soft smile on her face, the kind of smile that hides a question behind it. I asked her if everything was okay, and she nodded, but her eyes told me there was something on her mind. After a moment, she looked at me and said, "Can you teach me how to make your soup?" The question surprised me at first, not because it was difficult. The recipe was simple, but because teaching someone a favorite food always feels like giving them a piece of your heart. There was something tender in the way she asked, something gentle, something honest. It felt like she was saying, "I want to carry this memory too. I want to bring this warmth into my own life, even when you are not beside me." And that simple thought touched me deeply. So I smiled and said yes. She stood beside me in the kitchen, and I realized something interesting. Teaching is not only showing someone what to do. Teaching is slowing down. Teaching is remembering why something matters. Teaching is sharing a part of yourself in a careful, meaningful way. As I took out the ingredients one by one, she watched closely, her eyes full of curiosity, her hands ready to learn. I told her the first thing she needed to know. This soup is simple, so the feeling you cook with is more important than the ingredients. She laughed softly, thinking I was making a joke, but I shook my head and said, "I'm serious. You will understand later." She nodded with a thoughtful expression, and for a moment we simply stood there together, letting the peaceful silence fill the kitchen. I showed her the vegetables, how to choose the soft ones, how to feel their weight, how to wash them slowly, not in a rush. I showed her the chicken, how to clean it, how to place it gently in the pot. I showed her how much water to add, how much heat to use, and how to listen to the small bubble sounds that mean the soup is beginning to come alive. She followed everything carefully, repeating my movements, asking small questions, smiling when she made a small mistake, laughing quietly when she cut a carrot unevenly. The whole time, I noticed something beautiful. She was not only learning a recipe, she was learning a memory. She was learning the gentle rhythm of the soup, the slow dance of the ingredients, the calm intention that makes the warm feeling inside the bowl. When the pot began to boil softly, she leaned over it and breathed in the warm steam. Her face softened, the same way it had softened the first time she tasted the soup in my home. I told her that the next step was to wait. Waiting is always the quietest part of cooking, but it is also the most important. Waiting is when the ingredients learn to work together. Waiting is when flavors grow their strength. Waiting is when patience becomes part of the dish. So we waited, standing side by side in the small kitchen, listening to the soft bubbling of the pot. To me, it felt like listening to a small heartbeat, steady and gentle. She seemed calm too, her shoulders relaxed, her hands resting on the counter without tension. For a few minutes, we didn't speak at all, and the silence felt warm, like a blanket covering our thoughts. Then she asked me something simple but deep. She said, "Why is this soup your favorite food?" I had shared many stories with her before, stories from childhood, stories from quiet evenings, stories from long days, but hearing the question again made me think in a new way. So I answered slowly, carefully, choosing words that matched the feeling in my heart. I told her that the soup reminded me of home, not the building, not the walls, but the feeling of safety, the feeling of being understood without speaking, the feeling of being held by something gentle. I told her that the smell of the soup felt like a soft memory that never left me, no matter where I went in life. And then I told her that it became my favorite not because it was special in flavor, but because it had become a part of who I was, a quiet symbol of warmth inside me. She listened with soft eyes, and then she smiled like someone who finally understood a secret. When the soup was ready, we poured it into 2 bowls. She looked at the bowl as if it held something magical. I could see she was nervous to taste something she made herself, nervous that it wouldn't be the same, nervous that her memory might not match mine. She took the first spoonful slowly, almost carefully, and tasted it with closed eyes. For a moment, I watched her, unsure of what she would say. Then she opened her eyes and took a deep breath. She said, "It tastes like peace." Her answer surprised me. Not because the soup tasted good, I knew it would taste good, but because she felt the most important part. The soup was not a dish anymore. It was a feeling. And that feeling had reached her heart the same way it had reached mine when I was much younger. After that moment, she asked me if we could write the recipe down. I said yes, but I told her something important. The recipe on paper is simple. The recipe in your heart is what makes it special. So we wrote the steps, one by one, in the simplest way. But beside each step, she wrote a small note, a note about how the soup made her feel, a note about why the soup mattered, a note about the warmth she felt while cooking it. When she finished writing, the recipe was no longer just instructions. It had become a personal story, a gentle map of emotion. As the evening continued, we ate together, talking about small things and big things, about our days, about our dreams, about the places we wanted to visit someday. But underneath all those conversations was a simple truth: the soup had connected us in a deeper way. By teaching her the recipe, I realized that sharing a favorite food is like sharing a part of your heart. And she realized that learning a favorite food is like receiving a part of someone's story. Later that night, after she left, I sat alone in the kitchen and thought about the day. I looked at the pot, the bowl, the spoon, and everything felt different. It felt warmer, fuller, richer. It felt like the story of the soup had grown again. It had moved from my childhood to my adulthood to my friendship and now into someone else's hands. Teaching the recipe had changed me too. It made me understand that favorite foods keep growing as long as you keep sharing them. The feeling inside them multiplies, softens hearts, strengthens connections, and creates new memories for new people. And this is where English learning enters the story again. Teaching someone your favorite food in English, or telling someone the memory behind it, or sharing a simple story like this one, is one of the best ways to grow your language skills. Because language is not only made of words. It is made of sharing, of connection, of emotion. When you talk about something you love, your English becomes natural. Your sentences flow. Your mind relaxes. Your words feel honest. And that honesty helps you grow more than any rule or grammar chart ever could. The simple takeaway from this section is gentle but important. When you teach someone something you love, you grow and they grow with you. And when you share your favorite food, you are sharing a memory, a feeling, a piece of your story that will live inside someone else too. Just like that, language grows, friendships grow, and life becomes warmer, one bowl of soup at a time. There is a moment in every long journey when you stop, look back at the path behind you, and suddenly understand something that you never saw clearly before. And as I reached this part of my life, the part where my favorite food had already traveled through my childhood, carried me through my early adulthood, comforted me through loneliness, connected me to a friend, and lived quietly inside the deepest parts of my memory, I realized something gentle but powerful. The soup was no longer just a food or a story. It had become a part of my identity, a part of the way I understood the world, a part of the way I gave and received love. And as I share this final long narration with you, I want you to listen slowly, the way you would listen to a soft voice late at night, when the world is quiet and your heart is open. This story is the closing chapter of this journey, and like all endings, it is also a new beginning. There was a day when life felt heavier than usual. It was a cloudy afternoon, the kind when the sky is covered with soft gray clouds, when the wind feels cool against your skin, and when your thoughts seem to move a little slower than normal. On that day, I had just received some difficult news. Not bad news, not terrible news, but news that made me feel uncertain, news that made the future feel blurry, news that made my heart quiet in a way I didn't immediately understand. I walked home slowly, listening to the sound of my footsteps on the pavement. Each step echoed slightly, and the air around me felt cold, like it was holding a small sadness that matched the one inside me. When I reached my home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat at the table in the soft, natural light from the window and let myself feel the weight of the moment. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't even think clearly. I simply sat there, feeling the heaviness inside me settling into the room. And then, like a quiet voice, like a memory gently tapping on my shoulder, I thought of the soup. Not because I was hungry, not because I wanted something warm, but because the soup had always been the place I returned to when I didn't know what else to do. It was my small island of comfort in a world that sometimes felt too wide. So, without thinking too much, I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and began preparing the soup once more. The movements were slow. My hands were tired. My mind was tired. But each step felt familiar, like a soft routine I had known for years. I washed the vegetables. I cut them carefully. I placed the chicken into the pot. I added water. I waited for the soft bubbles to rise. The smell, when it finally filled the room, wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. For the first time that day, I felt my body relax, just a little. I felt my heart soften. I felt a small whisper of peace touch the edges of my mind. And as I stood there, I realized that my favorite food had become something more than comfort. It had become a reminder that I had survived many difficult days in the past. A reminder that I had found warmth even when life felt cold. A reminder that simple things can hold great power if you let them. When the soup was ready, I sat down with the warm bowl in my hands. I held it gently, feeling the heat travel into my palms. I took a slow sip, and as the warm liquid touched my tongue, I felt the heaviness inside me begin to loosen. The taste was the same as always, simple, soft, familiar. But the meaning behind it felt deeper. And then something happened inside me, something I did not expect. As I ate, memories from my whole life began to play softly in my mind, memories of my childhood kitchen, memories of quiet evenings at home, memories of my first lonely apartment, memories of traveling, memories of sharing the soup with my friend, memories of teaching the recipe, memories of laughter, of tears, of small victories, of quiet fears. All these moments came together as if the soup had collected them over the years and was now returning them to me in one warm wave. I realized then that this favorite food had watched me grow. It had stayed with me in moments when I felt strong, and it had stayed with me in moments when I felt fragile. It had carried my memories inside its soft smell and gentle taste. It had held my sadness, my joy, my confusion, my hope. And now, on this heavy afternoon, it was reminding me of something I had forgotten, that I was still growing, that I was still learning, that I was still moving forward even when the path looked unclear. And as I sat there in the quiet room, eating slowly, I felt something in my heart open. I felt a softness that I had not felt in a while. I felt a kind of courage, a gentle courage, not the loud kind that shouts, but the quiet kind that whispers, "You can keep going." And in that moment, I understood why this soup mattered so much to me. It was not because of flavor or because of tradition. It was because the soup reminded me that life is made of small things, and small things can carry great strength. The warm bowl in my hands felt like a message from every version of myself, the child, the teenager, the young adult, the traveler, the friend, the teacher. And that message was simple. You have been strong before. You can be strong again. After I finished eating, I washed the bowl slowly. I watched the water run over the spoon, watched the steam rise from the sink, watched my own reflection in the surface of the clean pot. Everything felt calm, quiet, gentle. The heaviness inside me did not disappear completely, but it softened. It became something I could carry. It became something I could understand. And with that calmness, I began to think about the future again, not with fear, but with a kind of soft acceptance. Life changes. Life moves. Life brings new chapters, even when we don't feel ready. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about the soup often, but not the way I thought about it before. This time, I thought about what it had taught me, that small things matter, that comfort can be simple, that memories live inside flavors, that sharing brings connection, and that familiar things can guide us through unfamiliar times. I realized that the soup had become a symbol of patience in my life, a symbol of kindness, a symbol of growth. And I realized something else that made me smile. Someday, I would share this recipe with someone else again. Maybe with a new friend.